Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I before I get into other stuff that I got going here, I don't really even know what it is today. But I got other stuff. My wife and I have been watching the Netflix, whatever it is, docu series on Harry and Meghan Markles, and it's hard to get through, especially the first episode. It gets better as it goes on. Um, and I'll tell you why the first episodes are hard in a moment to just watch. Meghan Markle is one of the most unlikable people that I cover. She just is unlikable. Uh, and that didn't change watching the documentary as much as they try to make it so. Not that I still would root for her and Harry against the rest of the royal family, just because the royal family is a evil institution, and um, it sucks, right? It's just has to go. And this documentary, I learned some things that I didn't know. Like they were obvious, but you wouldn't know if somebody didn't, tell them to you, right? Like when you hear them, you're like, oh, of course, right? Um, but my first reaction, and what I was talking to my wife about last night, was it seems like Harry and Meghan are making a play for the throne. And that became more and more obvious. Like I thought that maybe when we were at episode 3 or so. But the last 3 episodes, it's pretty clear. And I'll get into that in just a moment. The first episodes are like somebody's Facebook page or Instagram page, and it's trying to tell you how great the Markles are, right? Like it's um, showing you the Markles in there, how wonderful people they are. It's just like these when people put up a social media account to make themselves look great, right? To make themselves look better than they are. Their so-called best version, but not a spiritual best version, you know, a, a best popular version. And in the royal family, they're all trying to make themselves look good. And one of the things that I learned, which is kind of interesting, is that they each have their own press. There's the thing called for the firm, and these are the parasites that keep the royal family going, right? And they're manipulative, and they're the ones that more than likely killed Diana. They just their one goal is to keep this parasitic family going. They're the parasites that they're the handlers and parasites that live off the royal family. And each of these royal family members has a press team, and then they're governed by these the thing called the firm that runs and keeps the royal family churning, right? The royal family gets 86 million pounds a year, which depending on the value of the pounds is around $100 million of taxpayer money. Plus they have all this land and these other things. And then there's also the British Commonwealth, which is 54 countries, and that's where Harry and Meghan are making their play, and I'll get into that in a moment. But this is something that you knew, but you don't know. Like you're not conscious of it. But the British royal family is like a reality TV show, and the people in Britain and maybe some people throughout the world tune into it, and they constantly have to have news stories every day about a royal family member, and there has to be interest and scandals. There has to be villains and all these things, right? And so these various entities within the royal family and their press, their press people, the different press camps, the different these individual publicists are always conniving and trying to like destroy the other members of the family, right? Or to scapegoat or leak bad stories against the other members of the family. And so this is where the things went off the rail for the Markles. So when it starts off, let me just say this. became interested in each other, Meghan Markle's and Harry, by looking at each other's Instagram pages, which, you know, the Instagram pages. And when she was looking at Harry's Instagram pages, there's all these pictures of safaris and things like this, elephants. And, you know, there's always these cameramen, these professional photographers. They have all these artsy photos. Like they show a grainy photo, like some sort of, you know, photo you'd see, a poor quality photo that you might see from, I don't know, maybe the 90s or something like this, on their first date. And I'm like, it was only in something like 2016, and what, they didn't have cell phone, like quality cell phone. They have these grainy photos, and they have a lot of black and white photos. And they're always posing, right? They're always, you know, they have these cameramen around them constantly taking pictures. And, you know, they at least have one photographer and maybe, I think, many more that are taking these publicity shots, which, you know, they're trying to show how natural they are and how normal they are. And they're not really royal people. They're just like everybody else, right? But they bring a group of people to promote them, like do this publicity stuff, this, you know, publicist stuff. And, you know, that's what makes it hard to watch, because it's like you're watching somebody's Instagram page and they're trying to show you how, you know, normal and great and down to earth they are. And they have all these, you know, these privileges. And a lot of it is about how Harry was in Africa. Like he took Meghan Markle's to Africa. They have a lot of their Commonwealth countries are people of color. Like 80% of the Commonwealth people are people of color, right? These are former colonies that were conquered by the British Empire and now are part of what's called the Commonwealth. And, you know, the job of the royal family is to be likable. They have to be popular. You know, they have to have, you know, like human interest things. Otherwise, they would get kicked out of every country because they don't serve any real purpose, right? Other than, you know, this reality TV show that they create. And the royals have to go around the world and go to these various countries. You know, Queen Elizabeth did it in when she was first inaugurated or whatever. She was, whatever that thing they go through, that weird ritual with the globe and the globe represents her being God's representative on earth, and the scepter and all these things, the coronation, right? And they have to be likable and popular. And they go to these various countries to keep them in the Commonwealth. And it was very clear that they were making a pitch for Meghan Markle's being a woman of color, even though she grew up going to a Hollywood. It was like the word Hollywood was in the title of the school that she went to. It looked like some sort of Montessori school, you know, very new age and progressive. Her mom is African American, and her dad's white. Her dad looks like, you know, Larry the Cable Guy. And he lives in Mexico, but he did something like he's a cameraman or like a gaffer or one of those, you know, jobs where he works on the sets of various TV shows. And Meghan Markle's, you know, she doesn't look like she's biracial. Like, you know, when you first saw Meghan Markle, you didn't think of her as a woman of color. Like I didn't. You know, she's probably, you know, when I'm tan, I'm probably have a darker complexion than she does, right? And so you don't really know what her, what her racial background is, just based on when you see her, right? The first time you see her, you don't think of her as that, right? And she didn't think of herself as that, she said in an interview, until the royal family made a big deal about her race. But despite that, she is really pushing herself as a woman of color in these countries. And, you know, that's when I started to see, like in the beginning, I'm like, oh, they're making a play for the throne. And I'll explain this more as we go through the narrative. They're using that because both Harry and her are trying to be people of the Commonwealth countries, right? And the people who are disenfranchised in their own country. And, you know, this would be a way that they would pitch a reason why they could get the throne. And I'll, again, come back to that. And so in the beginning, she got very favorable coverage. very popular. They were more popular than any of the other royal family members. And they would have events, and she would be on the cover of these magazines. She would usurp the queen and all these other people, and she was getting the premier coverage just like Diana got, where she was the one that people wanted to hear from and see. She was a different one, you know. And the other royal family members didn't like that, so they fed her to the wolves. That's the story that they're telling in this, you know, that they're telling in this documentary. But the problem with it is that neither Harry or Meghan had a problem with the royal family until that happened, right? I mean, Harry had his reaction to his mom being murdered or whatever. And, you know, he had some bad feelings about it. But they didn't have a problem with it until Meghan was scapegoated, right? In fact, to me, the most telling moment was when she was having her wedding. She has a half-sister from her dad's side who she met only briefly when she was a kid, and they didn't have any kind of relationship. And the sister, you know, these tabloids were paying anybody and everybody around Meghan Markle's for horrible stories, even if they weren't true, right? They were, you know, because that's this, the gossip magazines in Great Britain have no, you know, scruples. I mean, it's just, you know, the media being the media, and they like, you know, sensationalistic stories. So they paid her half-sister to write things that weren't true and disparage Meghan Markle's, you know, you know, and she wasn't invited to the wedding. But Meghan Markle's was good friends with and became, you know, sort of a mentor to her niece, her sister, half-sister's daughter, and they were extremely close. And the royal family said, you can't invite this niece if you don't invite your half-sister, because the tabloids will run wild with it. And Meghan Markle said, okay. And she called her half-sister, her half-niece, or, you know, her niece, whatever it is, right? And her niece is being interviewed, and she's crying, like she's still upset by not going to the wedding. Like she understood it. She's like, seems like a, you know, nicer person than, you know, a lot of the people in the thing. But she was actually hurt by it. That she was, you know, somebody very close to her aunt, and she was expecting to go to this royal wedding. And Meghan Markle's just said, no, they told me no, and I went along with it. Because she was into it, right? You can see she's into it. She liked being a princess. It was part of the selling point for her marrying Harry, right? And Harry didn't have a problem with it either. They went along with something that, you know, most people, my wife and I were like, oh, that's effed up. Like, you know, it shows you the kind of people they are. And when the royal family wasn't, you know, when they weren't being destroyed in the press, they were fine with all the stuff the royal family has done. And they're not against the royal family or the queen. And, you know, Meghan Markle is marketing herself, Markles is marketing herself as a woman of color and a person for social justice. But you can't be that and be a member of the royal family. The royal family is the most racist entity on earth. I've said this over and over again. Because their premise, their whole stick or spiel is that they're divinely gifted by their genetics to rule over not only their country, but at one time, basically, you know, the whole world. And now they have all these Commonwealth countries. They were born to rule. That's what it is to be a king or a queen. You're born to rule, based in your race, based in your genetics. You're superior to other people. You have the right genes. I mean, that's the only, you know, I mean, that's their literal explanation, that they have some kind of genetic predisposition to being above other people, and they deserve a better, higher lifestyle and, you know, all these things that go with it, right? And, you know, they make it clear that this is like being in a gilded cage. You know, but people saying that they, you know, they're around the royal family said they would never trade places with these people because they're scrutinized, right? They're, you know, imprisoned by their whatever this thing is. And everything they do is staged, and, you know, they have these publicity teams, and they're told what they can and can't say, what they can and can't wear. I mean, everything is, you know, handed to them, but they don't walk away because, you know, the privileges they get with it. So it's this, like being in a prison And in the media, they made it very clear that the media in England thinks they're entitled to everything that the royal family has to offer. Like Meghan Markle's doctor was at a different hospital than a lot of the other royal women who gave birth to their little freaking royal, little royal babies or whatever they are, right? And there's no way that they could have this moment where the couple walks out right after the baby's born into the out of the hospital because there was no viewing area. This hospital that she went to wasn't built in a way that was where they could rope off the streets and they could have this moment where the public gets to see the royal baby. And so they waited an extra day and they did the viewing of the baby from the palace, and the tabloids went nuts saying, this is our baby because we pay you $83 million a year. It's not your baby, it's our baby. Like, we need to feast on your this story, right? This parasitic. I mean, it's just levels of parasites. The royal family's a parasite. The firm is a parasite, and the gossip media is a parasite. They're all parasitic. And the public, who, I mean, it just kind of shows you the stupidity of the public. I think there's 80% of the people are interested in the royal family in England, and they just they want these stories, and they want every little nugget of nugget of they want every little nugget, every little piece of story, right? And the royal family are these ultimate posers. And so the first 3 episodes, there's little bits of stuff that are interesting, or like we didn't know, or we didn't know we knew, but we knew, but we didn't know, right? Brought to our consciousness. Like I was strong. We fast forward a lot of it because it was just this, this really sappy music. Again, like I talk about how they manipulate you with the music, with the score, especially in these documentaries. I dislike it. Like, there should be no music in these things. You just go out and tell your truth. But they're like walking in these beautiful palaces and playing this sad music and trying to be victims, right? How they've been victimized by this whole thing. And, part of it is because of Meghan Markle's racial background, right? That's one of the reasons they're selling this, victim story. But it isn't really about that because, like I said, if she was a true social justice warrior, she would condemn the royal family because its whole existence is racist as it can be, right? Because you can't rule based in genetics. You have to rule because you're a good ruler. I mean, you have to be, you have to earn it, or be a spiritual person or something like this. It's based in your soul and your essence, not, your genetic makeup. You're not born to rule. But mostly what the royal family do is they're posers. They do these posing for pictures, and they're trained to they have cameras on them at all time, and they're trying to be the most popular one in the family, competing with each other. And if somebody is better, or is doing better, more popular with the press and the people, they take them down. And that's what happened with Meghan Markle's, like it happened with Diana. And somehow they cared about it, right? Like Meghan Markle said there was a moment where, her dad is a real piece of crap. Her dad sold, got $100,000 or something like this, and sold pictures of himself. And he was coming to the wedding. Then he pulled out of the wedding and said he had a heart attack. And, there was this communication that was like somebody had his phone in the press, and they wrote back something, and, they called Megan and not Meg, which is what everybody in her family calls her. So they knew it was somebody else, like this kind of thing. And they published all this stuff and made it look like she was being selfish by trying to make her dad come to the wedding, even though he just had a heart attack, right? And so, like, this whole, story blew up. And she said she was walking and meeting people, which they do. And some woman in the audience said, you should be nicer to your father. And she said, oh, these people actually believe this stuff. And she, got depressed and suicidal, right? So, this idea that you care about what the public thinks about you, because you should really, I mean, I've learned this myself. That's why I do the comment videos and I talk about this here, all the time. That people just make up things and make a decision about you. And once they make a decision about you, they will look for things that either make you look like a hero or a villain or whatever, their point of view is. People, make their own decisions about pretty much everything, which side they fall on. If they're a Democrat, they look for positive news about the Democrats and negative news about the Republicans, right? I mean, that's how people are. They're just biased, and you want people to agree with your point of view. You look for information that agrees with your cultural bias, right? And so trying to impress or care what the public thinks about you, when deep down you don't give a crap about them, right? I was talking about that comedian with my wife. We were talking about that comedian we watched, and he had this great, bit where he talked about the first thing you do when you get money is you isolate yourself from people, right? The more people, the more money you have, the more that you're in these private settings, gated communities at first, and then, all the way up to the ultra wealthy that just have these, vast amount of resources where only they and the people like them have access to places and, things, and they don't go out in public. They don't do what the normal people do. I mean, you get a driver, you get people, to buy your food. You get people to, even we're seeing with Cardi B, right? She was checking her food prices. I covered this, I think, on my other channel. I don't know which, maybe my other channel. Who knows? But she was complaining about the inflation, and she says she monitors how much money is spent in her house because other people are doing the shopping. In fact, there were, times where they left their baby in Canada with the nanny, or multiple nannies, right? I mean, they just left the baby and went back to England, for like, baby's like 1 year old or whatever, right? And so, like, even isolated from their own kids because they have, teams of people that keeping them away from, the riffraff, right? They don't go to normal places and do what normal people do, especially the more famous you are, the more wealth that you have. And so this idea that they care about what the mob thinks of them, but it's their whole existence is predicated on that as a royal family, that they're popular in England and they are, they're viewed as an asset in these other countries, these Commonwealth countries. And so at some point they turned on Meghan Markle's, and she was demonized, and she was on the cover pretty much every day about how much the other royals hated her. And this was at a time where, remember Prince Andrew got Jeffrey Epstein, right? He was with a 15-year-old girl. He's given her, a 16-year-old girl or whatever. I mean, he's a pedo, and he's got, he settled a lawsuit with her, and, Ghislaine Maxwell and all this stuff. And so that was an epic story, but the British press was covering Meghan Markle as being, conniving and all these things. And Meghan Markle is so, it's very difficult to like because she's so fake. She's so superficial and self-conscious, and she has that, PBS tone, and, she has all these moments, there's like a thing where she's like, I was with one of Harry's longtime security guards, and I just crumbled in his arms, which is weird because there's this idea that Harry is the son of one of Diana's security guys, right? And she's like, I just crumbled in his arms. This is like after they're doing the Megxit thing. And I said, I did the best that I could. She has these moments where she just realizes something with these interactions. And they play this sappy music and they make her sound like a victim and, how great a person and normal she is and down to earth. But, she was like trying to make her look, positive. But she's got this like accent like she's on PBS, and she's very self-conscious, and she's a part like PBS and Kim Kardashian, whatever, like this. It's this weird, annoying, just totally artificial and not genuine, right? Not authentic. The whole, everything about the family and the people is they're not authentic, and they're trying to be, average people when they put on these fancy uniforms. They live in these, gilded cages, and it's just so weird. It's like something that shouldn't exist, and it still does. and people are into it. Like British people are into it, and people all over the world are into it, and it shouldn't be that way, right? It's something that should have went by the wayside years and years ago. And it's like this, this entity that keeps it going, this evil firm, like, parasitic entity. I mean, it's just everything that's wrong with the world, right? Everything that both sides complain about. So Meghan Markle's gets suicidal, and it just goes down this path, and it's not getting any better. And she's kind of obsessed with not only the press but also social media and how she's being scrutinized. And Harry, starts realizing this, and they start coming up with a plan to get out of it, right? To move away from the press area and to live more. They say they still want to be servants, and they'll do it on their own money. They'll stop taking public funds, so the public doesn't feel like they have a right to their story or whatever. And so there's a whole negotiation with the family, and Harry starts saying that they did this meeting without Meghan Markle's when she returned to America because they didn't want her there, and that he got yelled at by his brother and his dad and all these things. And then there was a story that broke that said William was trying to force Harry and Meghan out of the family, and the royal press put out a statement saying, a joint statement between Harry and William saying that it wasn't true, and Harry never signed off on it. It was a lie. And Harry was, that's when he had this big moment where he said they did nothing to protect his wife, but as soon as his brother was in question, they protected him, and so that's when they just decided to leave. Like that was the, one of the many catalyst big moments that they talk about in the story, this narrative. So that's their official story. That that's why they're leaving, right? That's what caused what they're calling the Megxit. Another interesting part about it was that when they decided to leave, there's people there that have done the research, have done the investigation, part of their press team, and they found like most of the negative stories that were coming out about the Markles was from like 14 accounts or something like this. I just watched it last night, and but it was a small number of accounts that were responsible for millions of tweets. And one of the accounts was linked to her half sister. But they had all these accounts that were disparaging to Meghan Markle's, but mostly they were controlled accounts coming from the firm and the media. And they were, publishing these things. And they made it like, they talked about how much disinformation, like all the truther stuff, they took a shot at the truth community of how all this stuff is out there. But they were saying that this, this entity of these, these 14 accounts that were being shared on Twitter and all these other social media platforms, talking about how this, this disinformation. I got another story that I'll cover tomorrow on my other channel. Somebody sent me out of a San Francisco newspaper that talks about how all these COVID stories by pro-vax, pro-mask people was now discovered by a, like a mainstream local San Francisco newspaper as being fake. They were, which we all know. There's all this disinformation out there, these fake accounts and whatever it is, that try to change public opinion on social media, and they have the money and they get favorable, preferential treatment by the algorithms and all these things, right? By the institutions, Twitter and the social media institutions themselves. But my take on it was the way that they presented everything is that Harry and Meghan they're not appealing to the British people because they know they're not going to win them over because of the media, right? The way the media's handled them. There's a time where Prince Harry was the most popular royal family member after the initial honeymoon period with him and Meghan Markle's. They were the most popular, but now he's the least popular. So they've been destroyed in Britain. But what they can do is appeal to all the other people in all the other countries. And they're doing it by, putting her out as a social justice warrior, a woman of color. And 80% of the Commonwealth countries are made up of people of color. And like they're making a backdoor play for the throne by making themselves look like everyday people, a champion of the people. They still want to be royals, right? They still, they talked about how they missed the royal stuff. The condition in England is very heavy. The spiritual condition, right? Like there is spiritual condition everywhere you go. And I've been very sensitive about this since doing Sahaj Marg, the meditation that I do. The transmission, the cleaning, I'm more aware of my environment. Like if I go into a bar and just I haven't had a drink of alcohol since I was in my, I'm in my 50s, my late 50s, like 58, I think, right? Yeah, 58. So, I'm old. And, the last time I had a drink was when I was 25 or 6. Like I haven't had alcohol. I just didn't like it. I didn't have a problem with it. When I go into a bar, I feel like if I'm in a restaurant with a bar and I walk through the bar, I can feel it. Like even if I went to a liquor store, it's a weird thing. Like the energy of the place, right? And when I go to places that are very gross, I can feel it. Especially if I'm, like sometimes I'm, cleaner spiritually than I am, at other times. I'm more sensitive. Like after one of these spiritual gatherings. But when my family and I went to England, I we were returning from India and we flew through England, and it was a brutal, what happened was we were flying into Heathrow, and we were flying out of a different airport. I had no idea, of course now it's obvious, London's a huge city, there were two airports in London. So we stayed near Heathrow, and we got to Heathrow, and they said, "Oh, you're flying out of another airport." And I'm like, "What?" And then we didn't get there on time. And I had just limited amount of money to come back to America. Like I had like $5,000 and 4 kids, and we were coming back to nothing, right? No apartment, no car, no anything, no support system. Just this YouTube channel and what little money that I was bringing back. And I had to set up my kids' life. They were graduating from, it's just a disaster, right? Our whole, I've talked about this extensively in the Journey series. And, as demonized in the organization that this whole divorce thing was happening, and I was demonized in that. And, there's a woman that I was, basically dating or, going to date, that lived in Vegas. And when I, texted her and said, "Oh, we missed the flight," she wrote back, "How could you do this to me?" Right? Like I was in a panic that the tickets were going to wipe me out. Like I wouldn't have enough money for the tickets to fly my family back because we missed the flight. But luckily, I got to the airport, and there was this like saintly English blonde woman, that she was just so nice. And, in a way that, really nice person. And she went and she fixed it. Like she was just helping people, right? They had all these people, for, I don't know, greeters or something. I don't know what her job was. But she went and she said, "Oh, they're just going to fix your tickets. You can fly out tomorrow at no cost to you." Like it didn't cost me a cent to miss the flight. So my family and I then, the hotels and everything were so expensive, right? When we were in India, we were, taking advantage of the fact that the dollar is worth more than the Indian rupee, right? It's American dollars are, I was paying something like, 400, almost, around $500 a month for rent in a very, nice flat apartment that had, 3-bedroom apartment with 3 bathrooms. And, it was something that in America would have cost, more than twice that, right? But if you go to Europe, the dollar is worth less. This is how they've rigged the currencies. And so, the hotels where I was like, I can't believe how expensive everything is here, right? And so, we're spending a lot of money that I didn't have. And we ended up staying at a hotel and then missing the flight. And then there was a hotel in the airport itself. And I'm like, we're not going to miss another flight. So we went to that hotel, right? And I was just, stressed out because one of the reasons I didn't notice on the itinerary that we're flying out of another airport. It's something I'm not a good detail person, but I stress about it, so I make it happen. But one of the reasons I didn't notice is my daughter got sick right before we left, and we were leaving at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I knew she didn't want to leave India. She had all these friends there, and I was wondering if she was going to even show up. I mean, it's just all this stress, right? And we'd been through the flood and so many different things there. We just could come back from a gathering, and so it was. I just wasn't. Um, I didn't get enough time to look at the itinerary and make sure that I had everything right, like I usually would. I mean, it was just all these things happened really quickly, and it was an unbelievably stressful time. My son broke his arm, my daughter got sick. There's all these things that happened, that led up to the trip. So I was not focused as I normally would be. And again, I'm not a detailed person. You need to take extra energy to make sure, and I'm just not good at this kind of thing. So we were flying out, and we didn't leave till we left our flat at 2 a.m. So I got no sleep, and I was trying to get my family over there, and we were packing up things like kitchen knives and pots. I mean, anything that we could bring, so we didn't have to immediately. I went to Goodwill and just started buying stuff to, when we got back to America. Like it was it was almost like a crisis. It was, stressful and all these things. And then we were going through security, and we had to throw out stuff because we were overweight. When we flew into India, we had 50-pound bag limit, like a 50-pound bag limit, and per bag. And we each had 2 bags and a carry-on. But when we were flying out, we had a 40-pound bag limit. And we were taking things back like books, all my kids' homeschooling stuff. My ex had just left, and all of her stuff was there. And so that was an extra person. We had to bring some of her stuff back. And, that was a whole thing, right? Which I'm, not going to talk about here. But so we finally got out on the plane. It was like 4 a.m. and we flew to England. I was just zapped. I was just wiped out. Like just staring, I don't know if I slept or what, but I was just, I was just gone. And then so I didn't do what I normally did. And so that all happened. So we got stuck in England. And here's the point of it. And so we had a day, and it was like, well, let's go see, the kids want to see some of England. And there was, various tourist sites that we went to that we were going to go to. And we ended up being by Buckingham Palace, and I didn't know we were like right there. And it was so heavy. The spiritual condition, it's such a gross place, London. It's like, suffocating. And I remembered that, there was this excerpt from one of the diaries of one of the, Master Charji, the third master of the system. He was traveling with Babaji in England, and these English people came over, and Babaji said, this is like the grossest country I've been to, and I've cleaned 5% of the atmosphere because I can't even breathe. That he used, his spiritual, his cleaning ability. He said, but you guys have to work and clean it yourselves. Like, that's all I can do. But you guys, need to do this. And they were like, wow. But you went to France. Is it grosser there? And he's like, no, France was quite nice. Because France is known to be like more immoral and, less religious. But, I've been to these European countries and I don't like them. Just flying through them. I flew through France and I flew through Germany. And then, we went through a lot of other countries. And, a lot of these countries I would, just based, it's an experience at the airport. I didn't go to the country themselves. But London, we had this extra day, and we went to this castle. And the castle was kind of cool. But it cost us like $100 a person. Like, it's 5 of us, right? It cost $500. And, we were like, but I'm like, we're here once, we'll never come back, or whatever it was. And the cab rides and the food and everything. It probably cost, like just one day in London cost us like $1,000. I was like, it's kind of a disaster, right? And I was like, I'd never want to come back here. It was so heavy. And we were by Buckingham Palace, and like I said, I didn't know we were there. And I was like, man, this whole place is just so gross. It's just, hard to be here. And I don't know what it's like in the country or some of these other, like in Ireland or, Scotland or these other places, but London itself sucks, right? And that's the epicenter of this royal family and their whole freaking evil empire. New York City, I've been there a bunch of times, and Washington, D.C. we used to live by. I went there a bunch of times. Washington, D.C. has this political energy. And it's kind of like when you get there, there's a lot of just history, and I get excited about it, but then it just wears me down. Like, they have all this stuff on the mall, free museums, a free zoo, and, but it just, the big cities in general are very gross. But London is a whole different category. Like, I just, I really can't describe it, but it's got a different spiritual condition. So anyways, Meghan Markle's, they're pushing her out as this social justice warrior, this woman of color, who is going to shake up the royal family and is very popular in these countries that are in the Commonwealth. And when Queen Elizabeth died, all these, English experts were saying, and, I had thought the same thing, that these countries, these Commonwealth countries, were going to use the opportunity. They're waiting for her to die, and now they're going to, push for independence and get out of the Commonwealth. Lots of these countries, a few of them have already left, and some of them are, talking about leaving. And Jamaica was talking about reparations, and they didn't want Prince William, and his wife Kate is such a Stepford wife, and there was that photo of her who, when she was dressed like the Mia Farrow from Rosemary's Baby, the devil child. I mean, it's a weird, they're just so weird. The whole thing is so weird. But Prince Charles, because of Diana's death and the way that played out. And, one of the things they keep on saying in the documentary is that everyone else in the royal family has been through the ringer with the press, right? Because they have to have this drama. And so they all have to fall on their sword at one time or another. And Meghan Markle's is an outsider, American, who obviously likes being a princess. And they were basically saying, well, this is the price you have to pay, right? You have to take one for the team, so to keep the whole thing going, right? But Charles is so unpopular, and it seems like a lot of these countries will be open to leaving, these Commonwealth countries. And the other piece to this is Meghan Markle's and Harry, I should have said this earlier, they really were put out there as being woke, right? Like they're the most woke people. And so they're appealing to, this woke generation in their own country, future generation of woke people. They're like really in line with all these, woke ideas and all the rest of it. So, with the firm being what it is, an entity that wants to keep as much of the Commonwealth connected to England, if all those countries left, 50 countries, I mean, the Queen can go in, the King can go in and close down Parliament in Canada and these other countries. I mean, they still have ruling power, and they still have financial, connections to these countries, the Commonwealth, right? And so if they lose the Commonwealth countries, England will be nothing. It's a small little island with not so many people, and it'll be the end of the British Empire. And so, and also America, right? And Meghan Markle's being American, and them having a connection here and doing this stuff in America. And so, they've definitely monetized, oh, my family sucks, which, is whiny, but it's great because it's the royal family. The Markles have made a lot of money on this documentary and all these other things. The book that's coming out, The Spare, right? And the only way, I think Meghan Markle really wants to be queen. I assume Harry wants to be king. Plus, his name's Harry, and the most popular figure that's come out of England in a while is Harry Potter and all these things. He's ginger, and they talk about him being ginger and different. Like they just, all these things to make them more like you, like make them, they're not royal people. They're just like you that happen to be, like this is the way they're pitching this couple. And the only way for him to be king, now there's all of William's children. William has a son, so there's a line of succession, and Harry's not a part of it. But if the Commonwealth countries fold and start leaving, and they have a way of bringing them back in by having Meghan Markle's and Harry be the royal, the king and queen, I mean, this is maybe down the road. To me, this is what they're doing here. They're trying to make a backdoor play with the idea that they want to, appeal to the Commonwealth countries to stay and the woke generation. And these guys are, trying to usurp the throne in that way. All right, so this was supposed to be about 15 minutes, but it went a lot longer. But, it's kind of interesting. Let's move on to the other stories. Okay, so this story happened yesterday. I forgot about this. I should have mentioned this in the intro.
The breaking news that we're following: classified government documents found inside one of President Biden's private offices. The
What now?
records dating from Biden's time as vice president
Uh-oh. That's quite a long time ago.
during the Obama administration. CNN's
So that's all the way back to 2016, right? And the story isn't that Biden is evil and the media is evil, but Trump is good for you Trumpers, because that's just misses the whole point. The story is that they all suck, right? They all suck. Because I say this over and over and over and over again. If you're against a behavior, you're against it in all forms. Not when your side does it, it's okay. But when the other side does it, it's bad. And that's, the hypocrisy that exists that plagues our country, our world. I mean, this is another example of the media focusing. Well, let's show you this. Let's get more into this thing here.
senior justice correspondent Evan Perez has been working the story for us. He's got the new information. Update our viewers on exactly what is going on.
Well, Wolf, this is reporting from our colleague Jamie Gangel and our team. We're told that the president's legal team discovered these documents. They say it's fewer than a dozen documents.
Oh, it's only a dozen. It's just less than a dozen.
Classified documents that were discovered in a office that the president had when he was setting up an office with the University of Pennsylvania, the Penn Biden Center here in Washington, D.C. They were cleaning out this office, trying to close it out, and that's when they discovered these documents. Again, according.
So your whole argument about Trump is dissipated, right? That Trump was the worst person in the world. I mean, this is constant, and it's both for Trumpers and woke Bideners, that they're the same guy. There's very few differences between Trump and Biden. Biden's a little bit worse because he's a political insider, but Trump is, not that Trump sucks. So I'm not, there's no way to differentiate these two guys, right? When I used to work with the DSM-4, which is now the DSM-5, they had this thing called differential diagnosis, because there are psychological conditions, and this also would go with the medical model as well. And when you're looking to define a person's psychological condition, there are similar conditions, like somebody who is schizophrenic, might be schizotypal. I mean, they have all these schizo diagnoses, right? I don't really remember them all that well. Or they might be diagnosed with associative identity disorder, right? What used to be multiple personality disorder, because they have a lot of symptoms in common, right? There's lots of these conditions that have various symptoms in common with other conditions or other diagnoses. There's a lot of things that say hallucination is a part of the diagnosis, or all the personality disorders, the borderline personality disorder, the narcissistic personality disorder, the histrionic personality disorder. They're similar. And so how do you know which it is? Well, there's differential diagnosis. There are symptoms that exist in conditions that exist in one that don't exist in another. And like I said, I'm not a big, I dislike the psychological model because it's negative. But the differential diagnosis is, what they're going to do now. They're going to tell you how this is different with Biden than it is with Trump. I mean, that's going to be their position, right? Right from the get-go.
To the White House, there are fewer than a dozen documents. They've now turned those documents.
You already said that.
Over to the National Archive.
How many times did you say fewer? It's 59 seconds into the story, and he's already minimized the amount of documents. That's one. Differential diagnosis. That's one reason it's different than Trump.
Which has in turn asked the Justice Department to investigate it. Now, we're told that the U.S. Attorney in Chicago, John Lausch, who is an appointee of former President Donald Trump, is now handling a review of these documents to determine what next to do. Of course, the FBI is also involved in reviewing this. And Wolf, it's important for us to understand also.
And we know that the FBI and the media will give Biden more favorable treatment. And one thing that's different about this is that there's Hunter Biden, who's sold his father's vice presidency and his position access to him and his presidency. And so with Hunter Biden out there, a crackhead criminal, right? Criminal crackhead, not that Trump's family, they're all, they all monetized his presidency as well. So it's not like they're somehow, great and Hunter Biden is so much worse. But Hunter Biden is, definitely the scraping the bottom of the barrel, and he's sold access. So Biden having classified materials with that involved, right, taking them as vice president and having them now for, at least 7 years, and then being just discovered as the Republicans take over the House is convenient timing for a big story. Maybe they're trying to get rid of Biden here or whatever. But, you can't say that Trump's thing is so much worse because Biden has his own, details here that make it possibly worse that he had him. He had him for a longer period of time. He demonized Trump for having the same kind of situation. And he's got a crackhead son who is, involved in traitorous type of activity.
So that according to the White House, they say that this was obviously something that they turned over to the National Archives. I'll read you just a part of what they say.
Unlike Trump, that's another differential diagnosis.
According to their statement, they say the White House is cooperating with the National Archives and the Justice Department regarding the discovery of what appear to be Obama-Biden administration records, including a small number of documents with classified markings. These are documents from the previous Obama-Biden administration that it appears then Vice President Biden took with him when he was setting up this think tank with the University of Pennsylvania.
This think tank? What kind of think tank was it?
Well, do we know that Biden personally took these classified documents?
No, we don't know that. Look, she's shaking her head. Like, they already are trying to, minimize this. This one, watch this. She shakes her head here. Go back to think tank.
Took with him when he was setting up this think tank with the University of Pennsylvania.
Well, do we know that Biden personally took these classified documents to that private office?
We do not know. We do not know who packed these documents up. You would have to assume that this is something that the Justice Department is going to be reviewing as part of this ongoing investigation.
So this story here is going to be that it's not as bad as Trump, and I already saw it because this is from last night and this morning news, which I saw when I was eating breakfast. Both CNN and MSNBC were on an excuse-a-thon, right, for JoJo Magoo, saying how much it was different and better than Trump's situation. And then up on the toolbar, the sidebar of this video, there was a Rachel Maddow video. Details of Biden's classified documents story deflate right-wing whataboutism. She's, this is just day one of it. They've just found out about this, right? And this dude is already saying that, what about, that's what she means by whataboutisms, that it isn't the same as Trump, right? And of course it is. Like, I'm sure there are details that are different, but, Hunter Biden is a detail, that makes it worse. There's no way that Hunter Biden's presence is, there's something on Trump's side that is as bad as Hunter Biden, right? And so they both have things here that are going to be, differential diagnosis, but they're already trying to, minimize this. This is what I was talking about with the firm, with the the media around the royal family in the introduction to this video. There's completely different coverage for JoJo Magoo than there is for Trump. And there was this segment in the documentary where they showed that Meghan Markle's did the exact same thing as Kate Middleton, and that Meghan Markle's coverage was like bad and negative, and Kate Middleton's was celebratory, right? Like they showed the different articles side by side, like wearing the same kind of dress or wearing the same, doing the same kind of thing. And that's what we get with Trump, right? We've, seen it over and over again, that Trump gets negative coverage where Biden gets positive or no coverage for the same offenses.
There was a brief flurry of excitement on the right this afternoon when CBS News was first to report that the U.S. Justice Department had started investigating the discovery of classified documents found at a think tank.
It's pronounced think tank.
called the Penn Biden Center. This is effectively where President Biden had his
In a locked closet.
office in Washington after serving as vice president in the Obama administration.
It was all the way back in November 2nd.
He vacated office.
And they could have posted this. So this could have came out right before the midterms. This was before the midterms. So that's already one bad thing, where they withheld this information until, the midterms, right? The midterms were over.
Well, on November 2nd, lawyers for President Biden, lawyers who work for him in his personal capacity, were reportedly packing up some of the office space that the vice president used at the Penn Biden Center. In so doing, they found classified documents there.
No way.
Documents that they say were in a locked closet inside those offices, mixed in with some non-classified documents. This is, of course, a weird set of circumstances, but that's what they say happened. The White House has since confirmed the basics of this account, as have other news organizations after CBS News was first to break the story. The reason this created a lot of excitement on the right, briefly tonight.
Just briefly. They're gonna look at the facts. They're still excited, Rachel.
That it immediately created a perceived whataboutism defense for President Trump. President Trump is under federal criminal investigation for apparently deliberately hoarding hundreds of classified documents.
Not just under 12, but hundreds. One differential diagnosis.
Home in Florida, including refusing to hand them over after National Archives told them he had to, even after they subpoenaed him to get those documents. So there was this sort of brief excitement on the right tonight that they thought they had a new defense, right? Oh, it's supposedly so bad what Trump did at Mar-a-Lago with all the nuclear documents.
So this is how they're presenting this, right? Where she's trying to show that this is different. It's not different. It's worse because of the longevity of it. It's worse because they withhold this before the midterm elections. I'm not saying Trump has worse things about his as well. Again, I don't care about this because I don't like classified documents in the first place. Too many secrets. I don't, why do you have to keep so many secrets? Because you're liars and deceivers and you are withholding information from the American people because of national security and to keep you safe, right? All that BS. So I don't care about it. I never cared about this story when it was about Trump. I don't care about when it's about Biden. The country's collapsing anyway. It's the apocalypse. There's no stopping it. These are just, these are nothing burgers compared to what's really going on. But again, within, not even a few hours of hearing about this, they're immediately trying to say, oh, this is not as bad as Trump. And you don't know. Like, it isn't even, it's just they're giving you this story and you're accepting the official explanation and you're giving Biden a pass when it's just fresh out of the oven, right?
Documents and stuff, but look, Joe Biden's just as bad. Why aren't they serving search warrants on President Biden the way they did on former President Trump? As I said tonight, a brief flurry of excitement on the right about this prospect when this news broke about the Penn Biden Center. The reason it was only a brief flurry of excitement is because in President Biden's case, he and his lawyers appear to have actually done the right thing when it comes to these classified.
They held him for 7 years. You mean he didn't know he had classified documents? This is the kind of putz he is, right? This is your defense, that the guy had classified documents from at least 2016, when he left the White House. And we don't know when they took the documents. It could be even longer. So for the whole Trump administration years, he had classified documents. And then for the last 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years, or whatever it is. So it's, 6.5 years, 7 years, whatever amount of time it is. 6 or 7 years he had them, where Trump had them a year. And to say he didn't know he had them the whole time, and then when he did know he had them, they didn't reveal it until safely after the, midterm elections. So come on, right? Just stop it. Like he's unaware he had classified documents. That's how much care he gave to him. And what happened to those classified documents that whole time? If they were there, did anybody know about them? Did anybody find them? They're in a closet. Did the janitor find them when he was, who had access to these documents and how could they have been compromised? What was in the documents? And could they have been sold by his son or anybody else to a foreign country or whatever, right? And so just come on, it's ridiculous. It's just, and it's only within, 24 hours of the story. You say, all right, they're cooperating now, but for the last 6 years, they're withholding these documents, claiming they didn't know they were there, and they're liars, right? Oh, then there was this. This is a big story as well.
We're learning new details this morning about the 2021 U.S. drone strike in Kabul. Remember that during our botched withdrawal from Afghanistan? This was after our 13 were killed. It was called a righteous strike. Well, according to
This is the one where Biden droned kids.
the New York Times, the Pentagon knew that innocent children were among the 10 dead and made misleading statements about that reality. Joining us now, former Green Beret and...
So they killed kids, and now they're just owning up to it. And what happened to ISIS-K? Remember? ISIS-K, we got to get ISIS-K. They're worse than ISIS because they got a K after their name. And they're the new ISIS. We got to get them. We got to get ISIS-K. ISIS-K is evil. And now, where's ISIS-K now? We haven't talked about him since, right?
author of Operation Pineapple Express, Scott.
I covered this extensively in a recent video.
Man. Scott, you wrote the book on this moment in time. Does it surprise you that the Pentagon knew within hours, a couple of hours, that they had the wrong target, but they didn't admit it?
Hey, Pete. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, bro.
There's a lot about this whole thing that just doesn't surprise me, and certainly the way our executive.
Well, anyway, so I covered this recently. I've talked about how JoJo Magoo is worse than all these people because he droned kids, like that. Tell me what's worse than that. Tell me what Trump did that's worse than that. The vaccine, sure. The Operation Warp Speed, okay. That's a discussion. But Biden was also a part of that as well, even more so. And so. Droning kids is pretty much up there with horrible things that you can do. And, Biden did it. So there's no, he's better than Trump or, he's, this whole thing. More than 1,000 people detained in Brazil connection with attack on its capital. They had their own January 6th type of thing there in Brazil from what I'm hearing is considered a bogus election. Prince Harry reveals where his relationship with Camilla stands now, the Dukes of Sussex. He says, I have a huge amount of compassion for her, being the third person with my parents' marriage. and he wrote when he said, I love every member of the family despite the differences, so when I see her, we're perfectly pleasant with each other. She's my stepmother, and I don't look at her as the evil stepmother because the whole family's evil, right? Anderson Cooper says Buckingham Palace issued demand ahead of Prince Harry 60 Minutes talk. Anderson Cooper claimed Buckingham Palace demanded to see his blockbuster sit down with Prince Harry before the interview aired Sunday. It's not much of a blockbuster because it's the first time I'm hearing of it. Prince Harry reveals Meghan Kate's fiery text that caused tearful feud. It says here is about Princess Charlotte's dress that was not sufficient. Charlotte's dress is too big, too long, too baggy. Harry recalled the Princess of Wales texting Meghan. It's a tragedy for her wedding, I guess. She cried when she tried it on at home. Rather than agree to alteration, Kate allegedly demanded that all the dresses be remade. Meg asked Kate if she was aware of what was going on right now with her father. Kate says she was well aware, but the dresses and the wedding is in 4 days. And she wrote back, yes, I know, Kate. Just all this victimization, fathers and dresses and weddings, royal weddings. Problems with the way Meg was planning her wedding. Kate was having problems with the way Meg was planning her wedding. Something about a party for the Page boys. It went back and forth. And then Meghan said, I'm not sure what else to say. If the dress doesn't fit, please take Charlotte to see Ajay. He has been waiting all day. And Kate replied, fine. And when Harry came home, he discovered his wife sobbing on the floor of their home. She was sobbing over this. And just conveniently, she was sobbing when he came home. She was on the floor sobbing, and then he walked through the door. It worked out that way. She wasn't faking or acting or anything like that. She didn't stage the sobbing. It just coincidentally happened when he came home. Prince Harry, Meghan thought Andrew, Andrew the pedo, was the Queen's assistant when they met. So that happened. Prince Harry claims the royal family excluded him from the flight before the Queen's death. Prince Harry claims he was not invited on his family's private royal jet after hearing the news the Queen, Elizabeth II, was dying. I asked my brother, I said, what are your plans? How are you and Kate getting there? The Duke of Sussex claimed during the 60 Minutes interview with Anderson Cooper that aired Sunday. And then a couple of hours later, all the family members that lived within Windsor and Ascot area were jumping on a plane together, a plane with 12 or 14, maybe 16 seats. When Cooper bluntly asked him to clarify whether he was invited on the plane, Harry replied, I was not invited. Kablowie, he didn't get to go on the royal private plane. That's how mean they got. They're very mean over there. They're a bunch of meaners. So there are a few more things that I want to show you here.
Did you guys know that I'm like the #1 Google search last week?
No, young Kim Kardashian, we didn't know you were the #1 Google search last week.
Oh my God, Kim, shut up. You're so into yourself.
And then yesterday, I was the top AOL search for the whole week.
So this is like from 40 years ago. You were the top AOL search? Wow, that's impressive.
Do you also know that you were the #2 on the dumbest people from the New York Post? That's what as long as they're talking about me, honey.
As long as they're talking about me, I don't care if I'm #2. I mean, of the dumbest people. Who's #1, by the way? I don't care. I don't care if people think I'm dumb as long as they're talking about me. If I hear people, I'm walking by people and like, oh, look, she's really dumb and she's really fat and ugly and horrible. Hey, they're talking about me. That's what everybody says.
Is there a manicurist on the set tomorrow for Bongo? I really have no time to get a manicure. Unless y'all want to go. I have meetings and stuff. I have a photo shoot. I need a golden egg, Daddy. Daddy, I want it now.
Sometimes I just don't know how I got stuck in this horror movie.
Well, let me remind you. Your dead husband represented O.J. Simpson in the O.J. Simpson trial as a lawyer, and then you convinced your daughter and her lover to sell a sex tape which you arranged with a sex tape dealer, and it popped, and you guys became famous. So, and you crapped out all this coven of Babylonian hoes. So that happened first, and then the other things. And so then there was this. Look at this guy's mad. Boom, look at the push there. Oh, look at the push back. Look at these two titans. Look at this guy. This is an ambassador for peace here. And Fly Soja, who gonna win? Well, not you guys. So when these two heavyweight titans battle it out, I mean, anything could happen, right? All right, that's enough. Uncle. I got to move on here. Only spirituality will save this M&F world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.